Again, if those of you who know me know I have a habit of tripping over my own feet, so I'm just going to stand right here and introduce this next session. We have Sean Martindale and JP King joining us. The words that come up for me are idea generation, vision, conversation starters, much more than a storyteller, actually. So they have what I will now describe as the coolest gig in the whole wide world a few years ago. They helped pilot the City of Toronto's solid waste management artist in residence program. So to tell you more about that and what they've been up to since then, I'll ask them to join the stage and do your thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Can you hear us? Yes, fantastic. So, Sean and I have a really unique and interesting position in this world, and it starts with the fact that our badges say independent. So we have no affiliation. We get to stand up here and talk about what fascinates us, what challenges us in this world. And as artists, designers, and educators, largely the work that we do is about starting conversations. So we both share the privilege of getting to make art and then teach people about the work that we make. And one of the things that we really like to kind of start off with thinking about is provoking our students to contemplate waste. It's this strange material category that exists in our world that is mostly out of sight, out of mind, better left unspoken, unsmelled, unheard of. And the thing that I always tell my students is that there's something a little bit tricky here. There's an illusion at play, and it's that waste is actually make-believe. It's an entirely invented, socially constructed category, something that we've made up. And I think you all know this well as circular economy and circular design-based people, that waste is food. Waste is just an unrealized resource. It's something that we haven't yet captured yet in a material flow and a return. So Sean and I get to make work that provokes people to think about this. And with that.
So yeah, our first project that we worked on together was called There Is No Way. So I was asked to do a large-scale installation for Nuit Blanche in 2015. And a lot of my work is very installation-based. And this project was no exception. I was able to borrow 131 bales of recyclable material from Solid Waste Management Services at the City of Toronto. And I worked with them to create this corridor outside of City Hall. So it was one that you walked through and you would smell viscerally, right? This was reusable material, so it wasn't the worst of the worst, the organics, but it still had a good funk to it. And this 131 bales represented just a quarter of a single day's recyclable materials that the city collects every day in Toronto. Above, you see the phrase, there is no way, and this was taken from the influential ecologist Barry Commoner, his 4 laws of ecology. So one of them is everything must go somewhere. And the idea of throwing something away is really a falsehood, right? It has to end up somewhere. Even if we're thinking, like with space, we can throw things out there, it still costs something. And in our immediate vicinity, we have a lot of space junk, so it's still around. It's still gumming up the system and the works. So as part of this installation, JP and I went around to all the different types of waste facilities in Toronto, and we filmed what happens in those spaces. And so JP put together these videos that were on 6 screens on the interior of the corridor. And what we found is that some people on the night would just hold their nose and kind of beeline through the space once they started getting a whiff of it. But other people were really willing to spend a long time there. They sat and watched every one of the 6 videos, and they chatted with us and some of the solid waste representatives that were there. and we were able to engage with them and to show them what happens to our waste after it leaves our hands, because often that's really hidden. And in Toronto, it's kind of hard to actually even gain access to these spaces. So I'll let JP talk a little bit about the video works here.
Yeah, so as part of this installation at Nuit Blanche, Sean and I created an observational documentary. It's free of a voiceover, free of a narrative, and largely is just a kind of unobstructed look behind the scenes. And you've actually had the chance to see some of this video today, both on some of the monitors here as well as some of the monitors outside. It's free to view online. You can find it on Vimeo, Solid Waste it's called. And largely I think of it as, kind of the field trip that I always wanted to take in elementary school but never had the chance to. So we take viewers on this journey behind the scenes and confront them with the full material reality of municipal waste. What is being processed day after day after day? And on the one hand, I have a lot of admiration for municipal waste management. It's what makes this city a clean place. It's what makes life relatively pleasant. And on the other hand, I was also astonished that largely it's just trucks moving junk back and forth. And I was really surprised and almost horrified to see that on the other side of our single stream recycling, there are people sorting paper from plastic from glass. Now, there's some amazing technologies as well, optical sorters and air bursts, and I mean, it's phenomenal and advanced. But at the same time, there are humans there picking apart our trash. And we live in Toronto, Canada, in 2023, right? So the work that we've done largely has been a kind of an effort and an attempt to confront people with this material reality, this burden that we offload. And I think I personally came to an interest in this because in 2003, I was 17 years old, and the city of Toronto had a waste strike. And for about 3 weeks, if you remember this moment, all of the streets filled with waste. Christie Pitts Park, next to where I live, filled with waste. The skating rink, all of the park roads were filled with trash bags. And it revealed that in many ways, as a society, we are a bunch of hoarders. We just happen to have this kind of ritual practice that we go through every week where we take things out to the end of the curb and they're conveniently removed for us. But one of the things that we want to do is bring people into the almost disgusting reality. And disgust is a strange response because it's rather involuntary. And we recoil and hold back from things that we find biologically threatening or harmful to our health. So we try to hide waste away, and for good reason. It's ugly and chaotic and disgusting.
I mean, JP and I were both having these olfactory kind of flashbacks after visiting the organics facility where we opened up one of the machines called a digester. And it's kind of got all the nasty smells you can think of, all the diapers and rotting things end up there, but also all the kind of nice smells too. You got mint and things in there. So we'd smell something random like that, like mint, and it would give us this flashback to this overwhelming, awful smell and we were just there for the day in that facility, but there's people that are working there, day in, day out. And it's something that's, again, really hidden normally. We don't get to have that connection to everything that leaves our hands.
Yeah, so following our work at Nuit Blanche in 2015, Sean and I, as independent artists, proposed to the city of Toronto that they create an artist-in-residence program. And there are a number of precedents around the world for artists working with waste. In fact, artists are probably some of the most suitable people to think about value or to provoke conversations about value. Because after all, what we do as artists is we take things that are rather meaningless and worthless and we invent value. We draw people's attention to them. We put them up on stages and in galleries and plinths and podiums, and sometimes they sell for exorbitant sums of money. And sometimes they provoke new conversations. So the city very graciously granted us a year-long residency. And during that time, Sean and I had the opportunity to go back to some of these sites and produce a large-scale photo-based exhibition, which I'll have Sean tell you about in a moment. But we wanted to pause in the middle of this and propose a kind of theory of change around social and behavior shifts that may occur with the help of art. So, one of the driving questions in the work that we do is how might socially engaged art shift perceptions of waste? And I'll say a starting place is that artists recognize issues. We are sensitive and concerned. We have been talking about the same things that you've been talking about for a decade, maybe 15 years. We've been concerned about the shoes that we throw away, about the linearity of our economy. Now, from there, we aim to formulate some kind of creative response. And this is always the mysterious, murky thing, and where, if you know an artist, you kind of just have to trust them. You have to hand over the reins and give them time and space to experiment and play and make. And out of that comes some kind of response. Some of the works that you've seen today and have been up and on the screens. Now, with the right opportunities, we get a chance to put that up in front of public, like today. This is an enormous privilege for us. And the public gets to see the work, gets to experience it. And I think that's like one of the key things to recognize is that art creates experiences. And when Sean was showing you those photos earlier, we had tens of thousands of Toronto citizens walk through a tunnel of recycled matter and smell it. And it's, be so strong that they had to cover their mouths, hide in their jackets, and some of them even turned away, right? They were experientially confronted by something that was sensorially overwhelming. And maybe that artwork triggers an insight, like, maybe this recycling thing is not working quite as well as we had hoped. Maybe this linear economy and garbage that we produce is more of a problem than I had actually realized. And then we hope from there that that insight becomes a kind of catalyst for social and behavior change. So this is one way in which artists and artworks or designers, that kind of creative sector, might play a complement to some of your thinking around circular economy and circular design and could serve alongside more traditional marketing campaigns or educational efforts. So I'd say if you're in a position of power and you have the opportunity and even a generous budget, you'd be surprised. Artists will work for very little, sometimes even just a free lunch. But invite the creative sector in to work alongside with you. And one of the most important ones is give them the freedom to make what they think is important. And with that, you end up with projects like this.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, so that's one model of how art can operate or how it can be created. But there's many different ways that people practice art. And I think one of the things that JP and I kind of bristle at is this concept of the lone artist working in a vacuum. It's very much more about connecting. So it is that circular cycle for artists as well. We're getting influenced by what's happening around us, what's happening to society, and hopefully we are in turn influencing people in society. And I've been lucky enough, and we've been lucky enough to have proof of that in our own work. Like I did a project years ago where one of the people that experienced it ended up going out and getting a green bin and started recycling like crazy and forcing his roommate to recycle because he had seen this artwork and was engaged with it. It's not always that direct. Sometimes it might just be something in the back of back of a person's mind, and years later it will manifest. It's I think a real disservice to consider artists to be kind of separate and not embedded. And that's, this work that we've done as part of a residency is I think, speaking to that. We were very much embedded with this solid waste for this department for this period of time. They won an award for the exhibition that we did at Nuit Blanche, and then we followed it up a few years later with this Harborfront exhibit at the Harborfront Center just down the street here. So this is a series called Our Desires Failed Us, and we used a very simple visual trick here. We simply mirrored our really high resolution images of waste that we shot from around different facilities in Toronto. We were looking for, seams, good materials that we thought could be mirrored like this, but we didn't rearrange the garbage at all. These are just raw shots of what we found in some of these sites. And when we installed these pieces, we've had them outdoors and indoors at the Harbourfront Centre. We had them on billboards and on screens. And what we found is that people really did engage with it. They saw it from across the street, didn't know what it was, but came in closer to check it out. And then only when they got closer did they realize, oh, this is garbage. And that was the little trick that we were trying to play. We wanted people to engage with the subject matter that is usually kind of uncomfortable or disgusting. And we found that people were engaging with it so much that we had groups playing I Spy with the pictures, picking out little details. They would tell each other, okay, I spy this brand or something of this color, and then try to find it within the image. And so we found that there was a lot more time spent looking at these images than you would normally think somebody would want to spend looking at garbage, looking at something that's rotting. And in fact, the Harbourfront Centre said that these images provided the most engagement that they've ever had in those spaces. So you can see here, these are some of the images that we have had rotating during the conference, and you'll get the chance to see them again. But one of the things that happens when you mirror it is this phenomenon that the human eye just actually naturally wants to see faces and creatures in these mirrored compositions, right? You'll start to see kind of monsters or even architectural. This one is, I find, one of the most monster-like actually out of the bunch.
Yeah, so taking something that's entirely chaotic like the waste stream and using just a really simple visual technique to suddenly bring order to it becomes this kind of bait and switch technique. And that becomes an invitation for people to spend just a little bit more time with waste matter. Because the tendency is to move on as quickly as possible, right? Out of sight, out of mind, brushed under the carpet, ignored, put under the sink, into the waste bin, tied up, set aside. But these photos, large-scale installations, both indoors at the Harbourfront Centre and then also outdoors around the site, became provocations and invitations to the public to pause. You've got people walking down the street seeing this image from afar. And I showed my mom these photos at one point, and she was like, oh, that looks like a beautiful Baroque painting. What is it? And I was like, oh, let's zoom in. I'm on my computer, and I zoom in, and she's like, oh, that's disgusting. It's a pile of trash. And that was repeatedly the experience that we had, right? Drawing people in closer to reveal to them what was actually going on.
Yeah, and one of the challenges that we were trying to face with this work is how do you also communicate the scale of this, right? And one of the images we showed there, a longer horizontal one, we mirrored it, and we found that by doing so, it actually gave you a closer approximation to the feeling that you had when you're actually in the space than the non-mirrored version did. It was a weird thing. It was really hard to communicate just the scope, the scale of the actual space that we were documenting. And we found that this visual trick actually helped in conveying that feeling of being in the space. So, we talked about one of the ways that artists can work within a circular economy. One of the other things is that artists can work in a way that's circular as well, using waste materials as the raw matter. Here we're documenting it. In the Nuit Blanche, for example, those bales that were recyclable material, they went back into the recycle stream afterwards. And that's something that I do with a lot of my work, is use waste materials or even plant materials. But there's different ways that you can look at how artists operate as fitting within the circular economy, and sometimes it's in a process-based way, and other times it's in the result, the content, and how they feed back and forth in the community.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, Sean and I have this incredible position where we get to go spend our summers in Toronto's waste facilities so that you don't have to. We get to visit, every different type and site of material processing and document them and create invitations for people to come and see. Now, one just thing that emerged in my mind as you're talking, Sean, is that oftentimes when people talk about piloting artistic projects, there's this really challenging question that we face, which is around metrics. Like, how are we going to determine the success of this project? And that might be something that you're asking, like, why did these guys get to go do this? And it's really hard to measure the impact of artistic projects. But just to put things into context, in 2015, Sean builds this enormous installation flanking the eastern side of City Hall. Tens of thousands of people pass through that space. I make a video that accompanies it. That video has been seen thousands of times online. It's been screened at numerous events and conferences. It's led to teaching opportunities for both of us, other artistic engagements. It led to this project. It's led to us standing on stage today. There's a chance that some of you actually have seen this work in person, have already experienced this. And regardless of whether you did then or you are now, I believe that you're going to carry this experience with you for some time. You'll think, I went to this conference and we talked about material cycles and flows, and then these artists got up and showed us these like psychedelic pictures. That was the weirdest lunch. And that's our goal. So thanks for letting us be part of your weird lunch.
Don't run away.
Those last couple
We have
pictures
a few
were
minutes
some
for
of the,
questions.
oh, sorry, to speak over you there. I was just gonna say, last couple pictures were one of the groups playing I Spy in front of the, yeah.
I've completely abandoned the idea of finding questions in the WOVA app. Sorry, but I see a question over there. There's a mic coming.
Yes, so thank you. I'm actually curious about if you have any upcoming projects that you can share with us.
I've got a few, but unfortunately they're ones that I can't yet share. They haven't been released to the public yet, yeah.
Okay, and do you only operate within Toronto, or you would be interested in going to other cities?
I have, well, I mean, yeah, I've gone to many other cities, and I'm definitely interested in doing that. I've primarily been based in Toronto, as has JP. Yeah, I think we're both always interested, though, in going other places, and this work was very much tied to Toronto, like these were Toronto facilities, but these issues are present, almost everywhere. And that's true of a lot of the work that I do. They're often, environmental issues, and so, yeah, they're just as relevant in another city.
Yeah, maybe I'll just follow on that. For the past 5 years, I've been teaching a course at the University of Toronto called Discard Culture, which looks at a lot of this work and adjacent theories and draws on some of Kem's thinking. And I'm thinking about piloting that as an independent course. Sean and I continue to give workshops and talks like this. There was a question earlier about examples of transition design work happening in the world. I, through my work, have found myself now working with other companies and organizations to help them do like visualization and mapping. And so I just recently started a job that I'm in love with an organization called Dark Matter Labs. We're doing a bunch of transition design work that I'm quite impressed by. And I've also joined a Canadian-based organization called Nourish that's looking at transitions in food within the healthcare system. And they've drawn a lot on the work of the Transition Design Institute that's at the Carnegie Mellon School. So there's some really good examples out there. But yeah, we find ourselves constantly like weaving in and out of academia, public sector, nonprofit organizations, all sorts of cool opportunities. But we're all open to invitations, so you're welcome to come pitch us later. And I'll just say, probably the best way to get in touch with us, you could head to my website, jpking.ca. there's contact information there for both Sean and I, and we can continue a conversation if you're
Great, I see one there, and then we have last question over at the front of the room.
Hi, I'm Cindy from the Cooperators. I'm just wondering, have you done any art where you've done the contrast of here's what it looked like before and here's what it looks like after the circular economy so that you could share the insights and images separately?
That's a good question. I've definitely done before and after with a number of installation projects. I wouldn't say necessarily highlighting like this is the after the implementation of a circular economy system, other than like my own process that I use within the work. I will say though that I feel like artists who are open to working in a way that is embedded, you know, like doing artist residencies, I think there is opportunity there, you know, to showcase how to use different materials or technologies in you know, novel ways that might not have been considered before, or even in traditional ways that people don't really know about yet, or just to really kind of highlight what's already happening. So I think there are opportunities for that. I wouldn't say maybe directly what you're saying, but similar, yeah.
Great, and we have 1 minute left for our last question.
Jennifer Osborne from EcoWool. A lot of your work, at least this work, revolves around getting behind spaces that necessarily people don't have access to, but they are generally urban. What about other places like factories or agriculture or abattoirs, things like that that people are generally truly disgusted by like this, that perhaps as an urban artist you would not have access to?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of like expository journalism that exists out there, and in some ways our work kind of hinges on that, but the presentation context is a little bit different. The challenge with all of these spaces, especially the ones that are the most provocative and repulsive and disgusting and concerning and, you know, tread ethical territory, is that the people in charge don't want to let you in, and they don't want to open up their closed doors. So I'll really commend Toronto's Solid Waste Department for taking a risk on us and giving us free rein and access behind closed doors to show this off. Because I think, you know, most companies, if you run a company, I mean, would you let us come in and film the most disgusting parts of your business? If you will, by all means, you know, drop us a line.
And yeah, I've got a number of friends who are what you'd call, I guess, urban explorers, but so they go into factories, abattoirs, but generally they're sites that are no longer in use, right? So getting a lot of images of what was there, but the issue comes up, what JP was saying, is when that's in operation, you have to work with an organization or a company that is open to showing that part of their operation if you're going to do it in an official way, you know?
And maybe just one last piece, and I think this is important to hinge, is that I hope that you've seen from the work that we've shown you today that we're not aiming to just go behind the scenes and show you what's disgusting, right? Like, we don't want to go into an abattoir and show you skinned rabbits. That is on the streets. There are vegan activists doing that every day, and it's important work. Part of what we're trying to do is present something that is repulsive in a beautiful way that hopefully makes you a little bit more patient with it. So we're treading a line between beauty and disgust. And that's a strategy that we've chosen as artists.
Yeah, and it's along similar lines with some of our other work, like of doing installations out in public space or just public projects in general, is using other, you know, things like humor. You can draw people into a conversation that is usually very polarizing by trying to engage them in another way, primarily first, to draw them into the conversation. And that's something that's common in most of my work, and I think JP's as well. So we've shown you kind of one strategy that we were using here, but we always kind of shift depending on what the project is and what we're dealing with. I think that's another way that you know, artists might be able to bring a different perspective. We tend to be in these bubbles these days, and art included, where it's a circular system feeding in a negative way, right? Like it's just kind of self-perpetuating and you're not getting new information into that loop. So I think it's an artist's role to try to break those loops a little bit. Intervene and bring people together or bring people into the conversation that wouldn't normally be in the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for your words this afternoon.
Take a seat.